All right, the first thing I want to do is go over the structure of the Glade file that's used in this large application. This is the Glade display. It's running in Mint Mate Linux, running virtual under Oracle's VirtualBox. You can see up here, VirtualBox, and Mint Mate. It's version 20. It's easy to install. It runs fine. As you can see, if I disappear, there's the Windows background underneath it, and so there's Mint. The only version of Glade that I can find for Windows is out of date and will not work with this project. So you need to have some way of accessing Glade, and this is the only way I can think of that's easy. All right, what you're seeing is the basic layout of all of the widgets, boxes, buttons, sliders, you name it, that are going to be used in this project, and they're layered all over the place. It's a complicated structure with things on top of one another, and it's kind of messy, as you can see on the left-hand side here as I'm scrolling up. Of course, at the top we have a window container, and you don't really see it, just green outline all around the edges here. I don't know if you notice that pop up. Underneath we have a fixed container. GTK fixed, and it is the actual contents of the window. Everything is inside of fixed. All right, so we've got window, and then we've got fixed. At the window level, we have some information. We have, for example, the title, which is Windows 3.23W at the moment. There's a few things. Not much is set at the Windows level. I don't think I set anything at the fixed level. Yeah, no, I don't. I have a height request of 608 pixels. To make it just the right height. I don't have a width request. Otherwise, I don't think there's any signals or anything. No, the fixed thing is just kind of a placeholder. All right, underneath, and you can see it's the entire area. It's highlighted in green. The next thing here is we've got, let me collapse these things down. It's a little easier. All these adjustments up here, many of them are dead. I'll have to get rid of them. They were for spinners and so forth that aren't here anymore. Unfortunately, when you delete something that has an adjustment, the thing goes away, but the adjustment stays. And I need to go through. They get automatically named, so I don't know. I have to go through in detail to find out how many of them are still in use. And there's ways of doing that, but it's tedious. They don't hurt anything. All right. So at the below fixed, we have top 0. Top 0 also, see there's fixed, and top 0 also encompasses the entire area. There wasn't originally here. There were 2 stacks, and top 0 was one of the parts of the stack. There were 2 windows. One of them had all of the things you're seeing on it, and the other was a blank window to show slides in. So top is here. It really doesn't need to be. Things could be moved up one level, but believe me, when you've got a 5,000 line Glade file, you don't want to move things. It gets complicated. I suppose I should look at the Glade file right now. This is just a window in Linux Mint, and you don't want to be editing something, of course, while in 2 windows. The background window, of course, is editing player.glade, but this is player.glade. It's a giant XML file, and it's 5,264 lines long. So obviously you don't want to edit it very much, and there's all these adjustments, and I'll sort them out. They'll disappear with time. This is what it looks like. Here's an easy one, relatively easy. Child. It's a GTK label. Its ID is P2 time. Yeah, it's got a name label time, which is a link into the GTK CSS file, and it's got a bunch of stuff and so forth. Then it says where it's going to go relative to the container it's in at 172 by 94 x coordinate, y coordinate, and that's it. That's a label. That's what it looks like. Now, technically, I can move that. I could cut that from child to end child, /child is end child, and move it someplace else. And sometimes you do want to do that. But when you do it, you have to be very careful. This is very messy. Sometimes the reason when you would do something is you want to have something appear on top of something else. And where it appears in the Glade file determines what's on top of what. So occasionally you can't move things. I'm going to get out of here before I do something wrong. Occasionally you find yourself in a situation where you've got something you want to have appear on top of something else, but there's no way to put it there using the Glade interface. So you have to get out of the Glade interface, you have to go in with an editor, and with great care, move it further down the file. The further down the file it is, the higher it will be in the hierarchy. It'll be the last, it'll be something drawn later. I don't recommend doing it. I have done it because it's easy to make a mistake. So if you're going to do it, make sure you got to back up so you can get out. But anyway, top 0 is kind of everything. It's not much different than fixed. As a matter of fact, there's well, fixed is everything. It jumps around when I do that. Top 0 isn't everything. Here's top 0, but there's other things down here. They're largely buttons like pause at end. You can see pause at end just highlighted. That's not part of top 0. This is separate. It's at a higher level. Okay, top 0 is my main window. What's inside top 0? There's two things. One is top 1. What is top 1? Top 1 is this left panel. See, it's on green. That's the left panel. It's got stuff in it. The other one, the other thing that's in it, there's some buttons in it too, okay? Don't worry about it. These are the big things. There's top 1. That's this green button, this green area on the left. There's stack 1. That's this green area on the right. The green area on the right is a stack. It contains multiple things, multiple pages. So if I go into the stack, you'll see it's got page 0, which is the one we're looking at, page 2, which is that one, page 1, which is that one. I didn't really get creative on the naming here. It would have been better if I gave some other names, but that's what they are. Controls, another page, and covers. So inside the stack, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 panels, each one of which is GTK fixed. All right, so we go back to stack here, and I'll go back to the first one, which is the default one you normally see. So this right panel here contains all of the switchable stacks. All right, and these buttons down here actually switch them. If I click the button, it'll go down to the, this is the actual stack switcher down here. Stack switcher is separate from the stacks. There are stack switchers down here. The stack is up here. This was covered in one of the other videos. But anyway, it's down here, and you can add to it and so forth. I'm not going to do it now. It's messy as hell. All right, so we have at the top level on the right, we have these guys. So it's basically divided into two parts. The left part, which is a single GTK fixed. Oops, GTK, where is it down? It's top 1, it's below. And the right part, which is stack 1. All right, so that's how we've got things laid out. Now, if I go into top 1, what do I see in top 1? Well, there's a bunch of stuff here. When I click on these, you'll see they kind of highlight. There's one there where there's two on top of, one's on top of the other. Weight is a label which, it's someplace down there. I don't know where oh, there is weight label down here. See it? Okay. Finding them is a problem. You can search for them up here if you know their names. Up at the top here, it's possible to search, but believe me, it can be difficult at times. And sometimes when you search for something, you find out it's underneath something else, and you have to search in order to get it to highlight. All right, so we've got things like next play, current playing file, draw 1. That's a Cairo drawing area. That's the area where the frequency spectrum or the volume spectrum or volume levels are going to be displayed. It's a drawing area, cleverly named GTK drawing area. Okay, that's draw 1. View meter. View meter is an image. These are the images. There's two of them here, view meter and view meter 1. You see they're tiny little images because the system doesn't know what they really are. GTK, well, it does know what they are. Those are the backgrounds for the VU meters. The foreground is the actual meter needle going back and forth. The background is the appearance of a VU meter. You can change the image, GTK image. The image is shown up over here. You see it's a resource name, part 1, icons meter.png, and the other one's the same. It's just located differently. Okay, so that's where you get the backgrounds. They show up as very tiny icons here because they get their size when the image is actually loaded. So this is one of the things that's confusing in Glade, is that these are actually fairly large and they take up a fairly good amount of space on the screen here, but they only show up as a tiny little button here. You could go into common and you could play with them, but I don't recommend doing it. Packing is where they go. And relative to this panel here, they go at this one goes at position 7 horizontally, and it goes position Y vertically. So it's 326 from the top of top 1, 326 pixels from the top of top 1, and it's 7 pixels from the left edge. And likewise over here, it's at the same Y position, same vertical location, but it's further out on the x-axis. So those are those things. Draw 2 is another. Actually, these are images. They're static. They'll just be loaded. Okay. Draw 2 is another drawing area, and actually these images overlap it. You just don't see it here the way it shows up. But view meter 1 is actually right in here, and view meter with just plain old view meter is over here. That's where they are. And you can tell when it's running. I mean, you have to sometimes you go back and forth to jiggle these things. And the Draw 2 has a position as well where it's located and so forth. And that's carefully positioning to get everything aligning up. It's trial and error. I suppose you could sit down and calculate it, but trial and error is the easier way to do it. VLC position, that's this slider down here, which has an adjustment 8 to it. That's where the information as to where we are is contained and so forth. Its position packing is at 4 from the left margin and 494 from the top of top 1 and so forth. Position label, this is a label that will be updated showing what percentage of the media file has been played. This moves as the media file is played. This gives the percentage. When it gets out here, it's 100%. Let's see, time next, which calculates internally. It calculates the time of the next media file to be played, and this will be updated internally. Right now, it just says Q, and then we've got a timer, which is it gives the Q. It gives the actual time of the next, and then it's in X seconds, and it tells me how many seconds are remaining. Let's see, Sgr Studio, that's this guy up here. It gets modified. The program reads from a file called title.txt every couple of seconds, and the first line in title.txt gets put up here. Draw 3, that's where the clock goes. That's another drawing area, and the clock is going to go in there. And then there's an egg image. You've got to have an Easter egg, and that's where the Easter egg goes. Again, it's an image that gets loaded. So this small square does not represent the image. The image actually takes up this whole area here when it gets loaded. All right, what can we do? Let's take the position label. That's like a little bigger label. How about time to hour? Is that here? No, I think time to hour is actually floating around someplace else. It's way down here. It should be, technically it should be up there, but it's okay. It doesn't hurt. Time to hour, there it is. If you go over here, it's time to hour. It's got a, that's the appearance. You see it first, but in actual fact, when the program's running, it's going to be up. It's going to be filled in with a number of minutes to the top of the hour. Let's see. It's got a position, and over here, it's got. It doesn't have much information other than the widget name. The widget name up here. That is a label in the GTK file. It's a label in the GTK file that tells the GTK system what CSS to use when displaying the label. If I didn't have the widget name here, it would default to whatever is, you would get default settings. You can modify them up to a point, but if you want the label to have a specific CSS attached to it, you have to give it a widget name, and that widget name corresponds to a label in the GTK CSS file that's being used for this project. How does it know about the GTK CSS file, you're asking? Well, up here under this little mechanics thing, you can see it's got some stuff in here. And the version of GTK required, there it is there. Custom CSS style provider. It's GTK CSS, and it is in the CSS subdirectory. So there's a CSS directory. In it, there's a bunch of things that are .css. One of them is GTK CSS, which is a hacked version of Linux Mint Mate Mint X theme, okay, which I've heavily hacked and not finished hacking. But anyway, that's where it's getting the. So when you see small label is in gtk.css and it's in the subdirectory CSS, and they are many of them this way. If I click on this label up here, you see it says tiles. That's its widget name. There's a bunch of widget names. I'm not sure if all of them. Equalizer label is well, that's the one under here. I don't know. I've got equalizer label. I reuse some of these names. Equalizer label too, because they're different size fonts. But anyway, so whenever you see under common something under the widget name, it means there's a label in GTK CSS which gives the CSS that will be applied to this widget entity, whatever the entity is. All right. So top one is that side. The other side here is, let's go up since I opened it, as it turned out. Here is page, or here's the stack. It's got a whole bunch of them in, but the first one is page 0, and that's the one you're seeing there. And this has got a lot of stuff in it. First of all, it's got all these buttons. And that the red you're seeing popping up is because each of these guys is SW. Well, I don't know if I actually clicked on one of them. Tiles. Tiles is the one that has the attribute that gives you the red edging when you mouse over. Okay, so so it's coming from that, and it's so let's look at the top here. P1. This is P1 over here. This, oddly enough, is called P2, P3, P4, and so forth. The numbering in here is sometimes erratic. When I started writing it, I didn't know what I was doing. I don't know if I do yet anyway, but I used some numbers and then things got rearranged, and there's places where the numbers are not sequential. And there's no rhyme or reason other than the fact they were historic and they got that way, and changing them would be a couple of days worth of screaming. So I haven't changed them, but these are numbered. So the first one is P1, second one is P2. All these 12 are the same. What is in them? Well, the GTK fixed, page P1. If I look at P1 here, you will see it is a label. Do I have anything in it? It's got local content. Focus, add custom content. Okay, add custom content. Notice that check mark. It's not a regular button. A regular button would have something down here, which would be the text. I'm not going to change it because I'll have to retype everything in it because it loses it. You can't just back out. Okay, so I'm not gonna say change this to label with optional image. That's normal. A normal button. I don't know if I get a normal button on the screen, to be honest with you. Normal buttons would just have the text here that appears inside the button, and you get all the defaults. You get that light gray on, or slightly darker gray on light gray, with large bulgy edges and so forth. And I've tried to make things small and compact and have bright colors and things like that. So yeah, the add custom content. What is the custom content? The custom content of P1 GTK button is the label. And if you remember when I did it in one of the earlier videos, is that you can, when you add a button and you say add custom content, the button just has a gray slashed area. You can then, for example, the normal thing is to go to display and to say GTK label or image or whatever you want to do and drag it and drop it into the button. So what you're seeing here is LBL1 is inside P1. Okay, here is P1. You see P1 is got a label in it, label 1. And if I go to label 1, there's label 1. It's got an ID because it has an ID. Many labels don't have IDs; they just sit there. But these labels have IDs because they're going to be accessed by the program. So on this screen here, we've got 12 at the top and 4 at the bottom. We've got 16 labels that are going to be accessed by the program. This creates a lot of internals because each one of these has to be an object that can be accessed from the program, because I put in here the name of the program or the media file that's currently playing. All right, so label 1, it's got, again, it's called tiles. That's what gives it its more or less shape and stuff. Let's see, I don't have any signals at this level. The signals are at the P1 level. If you click on the label, which is contained within a button, it's the same as clicking on the button. Okay, so technically you're going to be clicking on the label, but in reality the button gets the signals. And you can see the signals. These are deprecated. That's what the little warning sign means. They don't have anything to do with me. On P1 clicked is a signal. Button press event is a signal. Drag begin is a signal. Drag data get is a signal. Drag drop is a signal. Drag end is a signal. I think that's about it. Oh no, there's a P1 scroll event. You can have a scroll event too. So the button P1, which contains the label 1, can have all of these signals. Now the button press event is whatever you do, left or right button on a mouse. What's a press event? Left or right? A press event will then allow you to determine which one happened, whether it was a left or a right. If it's the left button, then it surrenders the signal to clicked. Clicked is normally the left button signal. If it's a right button, then it calls a program which reads the metadata for the file, even both of them eventually to return. The drag begin, data get and drop, all this drag stuff is you can drag stuff from one tile to another by holding down the left button and dragging it. And these are the signals associated with that. The scroll event is that if you have your mouse on top of one of these things and you hit the scroll and you start going with the scroll wheel on your mouse, it will tell the system to advance or retreat through the file. So so what you're seeing here is 12 media files out of, you may have 1,000 loaded, and you're seeing a window of 12 of them. So if you move with if you were to hit the scroll wheel, it would tell it to start scrolling. So new tiles would come in from the lower right and they would exit out of the upper left, or vice versa. Okay, so it's a scroll thing, and the individual buttons can be used to scroll. It's essentially the same thing as as the slider here. When you move the slider, it generates a scroll event. The slider itself you can use with the mouse wheel. All right, so those are the signals, and they all have the same signals, the same set of. I mean, they're all the same because obviously one goes to P1, the other one goes to P2. But, so all of these buttons, all 12 of these buttons have the same signals. These buttons down here have many of the same signals. They're not quite identical because not quite the same thing happens, but yeah, they're very similar. Anyway, they're numbered, they're up in the 20s because I reused P's someplace else. So P1 through P12, and then we get P22, 23, 24, 25. So somehow the search scroll got in between 23 and 24 and 25. But 22, 23, 24, 25, they're there. And the scroll search is that guy down here. It's okay to be in between. It doesn't matter at this point. It's not on top of anything. It's in between them by accident. All right, going back up to the top again, because it's got more stuff, is we've got 3 labels here for each one of them. You see these 3 labels carefully positioned. Okay, they're very carefully positioned. They're positioned relative to the larger window here, which is P0, right? Or P0, or stack 1, or stack 1. Okay, the edges are the same. But anyway, these are carefully positioned, and these are they're the times when a media file shows up. The first time is the time when it's going to start playing. The middle one is the length in seconds. And the final one is the time when it will end playing. All right, so each of them, so we got 12 buttons, and each button has got 3 labels. These are all going to be accessed from the program. So we're now up to 36 entities, which involve time. All right, there's no time for these guys down here. Okay, they don't operate that way. You getting the idea of how this works? So those are all the labels, and this is a scroll bar. This scroll bar, when you move it back and forth, it causes these guys to rearrange, moving forward or backward in the list. You read in at the beginning of the program a list of media files that you want to play, and it shows you the first 12. If you want to advance through the list, you drag this scroll bar over, or you use your mouse wheel. All right, and those are signals. Mouse signals are all over the place. If I just look at this guy, scroll 2, I really got creative with the names again. If you go over in the signals, it's got scroll value change. That's the drag and drop. It means it's not drag and drop. That's the drag on it. I shouldn't say drag. And you've got the scroll event. It's got two. One of them is if I actually physically drag that little button. The other one is if I mouse over and hit the scroll wheel. That's the scroll event. The other one is the value changed event. And all right, so see, what else can I say about that? Oh, one of the things is that's not what a regular scroll bar looks like in GTK. It is, again, a light gray lozenge on a slightly darker gray trough. Everything's gray. I don't like everything gray because I can't see it. My eyesight's not that good. So I decided to make things, and it's big. So I decided, number one, to make it colorful, easy to spot, and make it narrower. There really wasn't any need to have a giant lozenge walking across the screen. Some people like it, but I wanted to make things compact. So when you get over here, there it is, Sgr Slider. So if you go to gtk.css, you will see something that says Sgr Slider, and it actually gives the CSS to modify the appearance of a standard GTK slider, or scroll bar. Technically it's called GTK scroll bar. I call it a slider. But yeah, and down in I'll bring that. Well, let me bring it up right now and see it. Okay, hello. Go down. Here I'm in the directory. I'm in Linux mode here because it's easier for me. But you could do this from the Windows side. You can edit from there. The only thing you have, what you need you need some kind of Linux system to bring up the Glade. I'm sorry, that's just the way things are. You can edit from the Windows side, on the Windows side if you want, but CSS and gtk.css. There it is. So I've like I said, I've been hacking in here, and you're going to see a lot of debris as I've been trying to figure out, what works and what doesn't work. There's still a few things that are a mystery, which we'll find out eventually. So what does it call? Sgr Slider. And there it is. You see, that's a label, # Sgr Slider star, which means everything. Sgr Slider is going to have a basic background color of black. That's just kind of you don't see black. Technically, there is black all around. The actual slider, GTK slider, the actual entity called the slider in it, that's the little ball that goes back and forth. There's the size, the padding, and all of that stuff. For example, the border color is 0 pixels of blue. So if there were any, they'd be blue. Padding to the left, 0. Padding to the right, 0. In other words, in a regular slider, there's huge amounts of padding. I got rid of the padding. Minimum width, minimum height, that drops it to the size you're seeing. So it's almost square. Border radius, that determines curvature. So you get a rounded outline black. I don't know if you actually see it. The background light greens, there's the color you're seeing. Border color, and so many of those you don't actually see. The green is the thing you're seeing. And then there's the trough. The trough is blue. The border radius is a rounding, rounds the end of it, and so forth. There's another slider bar there. So yeah, there's GTK CSS, and it sets up things that. Let me see. Can I scroll this over a little bit? Well, you don't see the rounding here, but there is rounding on the trough. Here's a trough which is bigger than that trough. I don't know why. I should probably make them both the same size. Well, I could. Actually, this trough guy here is just plain Sgr Slider, and this is this guy is Sgr Slider, and this guy is, well, I guess they're both the same. They look, when I click on them, they look different. That's why. There is another slider down there because it's the vertical slider used on the next page. So anyway, that's all of the detail on this panel. If you go to the next panel, let me see if I can collapse all this because I don't. You see, every one of those is a widget that has to be accounted for inside the program. I mean, it is messy, but it looks hideous. It's detailed, but they're all the same. I mean, what you do when one of these gets clicked is basically the same. All you need to know is which one got clicked. So. It means the code is very redundant. And so in places in the code, I just use macros. Macro containing what the function is. The only thing I need to fill in is what button number got pressed. And so you'll see a lot of macros. I don't know if they help things. They certainly make the visual appearance of the code smaller. If the same amount of code is really there when the macros expand, but it may or may not help. I'm not sure. I mean, it's easier for me. Some people might find it more confusing. Okay, page 2. Okay, page 2. We've got a similar set of messes here. We have got not only a vertical slider. We have got all these buttons down the left-hand side. We have got, let me make this a little bigger. We have all these buttons down the right-hand side. This one is, and we've got all of these entry boxes in the middle. And then up here we've got a Gtk File Chooser, another Gtk entry, and more buttons, and of course more buttons down here. This one is a big one, but again they're all somewhat similar. So if I go to so I'm in page 2. Button 1, where's button 1? Oh, button 1's up there. I didn't know that. Button 3. Okay, here's where we get into the let's number them any way we want to. So you see this, button 1's up the top, button 3 here. I don't know if there's a button 2. Button 8, button 9. I'm sorry about this, but I'm not going to change it right now. You can see as I'm going down, they're clicking down. Button 14. Then we've got, there's more buttons down here. They're just further down. Oh, there's button 2. I'm sorry. Button 5, button 6, button 15. It was historical, but they work. All right, so there's all those buttons. This guy here is the vertical slider. There's where you're going to get, well, it says Sgr Slider. Oh, I guess the slider is told to be vertical. All right, I thought it was a different set of CSS. It's told to be vertical as opposed to be horizontal. Anyway, then we get all the entry boxes. We get a bunch of entry boxes where they all go to. There's the up-down boxes over here. There's the check boxes over here. Okay, there's delete boxes. Where are the delete boxes? If I click on one, it'll jump to them. There's the delete boxes. And they got the weird numbering, but don't worry about it. There's just 12 of them. If you ignore it, it'll go away. Someday I may fix them. But anyway, there's just lots and lots of buttons here. And every one of them has a set of like the play buttons here. Let me go to 3, which is they're the same, really. I mean, they effectively do the same thing. They're not obviously the same, but okay, button 3. Packing, that's where it gets located. It is a minor button. That's the GTK label for it. And the signals are just basically clicked. That's the only signal, I think, for this one, isn't there? No, we've got a query tooltip. A lot of them have query tooltip, which means if you mouse over it, it generates a query tooltip signal. And if tooltips are on, you'll see the tooltip pop up. If tooltips are off, which is another button, you won't see it. And then there's a scroll event. You can scroll anything. How do I get the tooltips? If I go over here, you'll see down here well, no, there actually is a standard tool. Well, that is the standard tooltip. So every one of them is going to be play file, I think. Well, no, I guess most of them are play. The first one is play fun. Well, let's change it. Just make it play. Which is what the button says anyway. So if you mouse over, it's gonna do a query tooltip, and the query tooltip can show you the tooltip or not internally. It tells it whether to turn on tooltips or not. All right. I don't believe that the custom tooltip is where it would calculate a tooltip internally. These are just static tooltips, and you can see them in the XML file. Okay, let me save that. Sometimes when you save in the if you're in VirtualBox and you're editing a file which is actually a Windows file, these files are actually in the underlying Windows system. They're on an NTFS file system, as opposed to Linux files, which would be in the Linux VirtualBox file system, which would be ext4. Sometimes when you go to save, click the save up, you'll get some kind of message. You just keep clicking it. There it is. Comes and goes. I don't know why. Just say OK. It's some idiosyncrasy in dealing with them. There's some were serious, but that's not a serious one. So if you get that, just say OK and forget about it. It has to do with a backup, and you get sometimes some weird name backup files that you just plain delete. All right, so there's all the the button stuff on this one. There's a lot of them. So again, I'll collapse page 2. Page 1 is a bunch of sliders. Okay, there are a bunch of scroll bars. I should say scroll bars is the correct word. And a bunch of radio buttons. These are the radio buttons. No, those are the labels. These are the labels. These labels will be, if you pull the scroll bar back and forth, these labels will be altered, indicating what you did. And of course, they all got names, and they're listed as equalizer label. They all got names. It means they're all entities inside the program. So if you start dragging the scroll bar back and forth, the program will modify the label. So it's got to have access to the label's name. So there's a lot of widgets that are inside the program. You'll see them if you haven't already. And then there's all of the, for some reason it's calling these deprecated. I have no idea why. Oh, it's seeing this thing, alignment. I don't know why it saw that. It came from the other side. It came from the Linux side, and for some reason it doesn't like the alignment. It means it's deprecated, which means sometime in about 100 years it'll go away. Deprecating something doesn't necessarily mean it's going away. It's just telling you not to use it, not to write new code that way. They still work. But anyway, I don't know what it's supposed to be. The alignment here, again, anyway, it's custom content, so it doesn't matter what the alignment is, because that's a button. It's the main thing here is it's flat is a radio button, and it contains a label. It's custom content again, same as before. And I do a lot of the custom content so I can control the size of it and things like that. So much of it is custom content. So that's that page without, I mean, it's just more of the same. It's buttons and bows and whatever. The controls page, again, more buttons, slightly different. For example, if I go up here, this guy, you can see, well, that's the label. This is the button. The button is no graph, and inside it is the label. The label doesn't have an ID. Okay, no graph, which is that one this one up here in the upper left. That of course does have an ID. It's no graph. The label in it, the one thing you're actually seeing, does not have an ID because the program does not modify it. It's static. So there'll be labels and things that have no ID because they're not being modified by the program. That stays the same throughout the program. Let's see, we got a spinner over here, spin button. A spin button has a label underneath it. It's not in it. The spin button has has a name of slide ID, and it also has a spinner widget name in the Gtk CSS, which controls its size. Otherwise, spinner buttons are really big. They're really giant, and I don't like really giant big things. So I modified it. If you liked really giant big things, you can go into the definition of spinner in gtk.css and change it. And you can change colors. You see, I've got highlighted my own colors in it. It looks like it's not aligned, but it is. If you actually look at it, it's these are sometimes what you see on the Glade is not exactly what you're going to see on the screen when it runs. Wow, any more? Okay, covers family has only one thing. Covers has an image, and the image has a name because the image is going to be loaded. Top image. Okay, so it's the simplest. All right, so get the idea. This is the switcher, and I'm not going to get into the business of how if you double click on them or click on them, you can switch manually. Sometimes you have to click twice. But and then you get other stuff that pop up, or you can click the actual. All right, so what have we got here? Now we got rid of controls. We can get rid of stack 1. And beyond that, we just have some miscellaneous buttons. There's really nothing else here until we get down to debugs. This guy here. This is a separate window. This is a separate window. It's a Gtk Dialogue, which pops up when you want to load and save a program. Okay, it's not visible until you actually click on it's actually save program, load program, and it brings up this dialog box. It's an independent window, pops up by itself. I don't know if I put no, I didn't, so it's not even customized. You'll see it if you try it. It'll do it. So that's what it looks like. And I'm going to kill it. Oh, I guess I must have modified something and didn't realize it. So I'll hit save. Excuse me. You should all be wearing your masks. All right, so I'm back in Linux here, and Windows underneath, of course. Oh, I've got 2 versions of it. Oh boy, I hope I didn't cancel them. That's me trying to kill the VirtualBox. I had 2 versions of it running. I hope I didn't screw something up. Some reason you can do that. Anyway, so here is my here's a window in Linux. This is something you need to be in Linux to do. That creates, as we mentioned, dash LH. Well, I can spell it correctly, couldn't I? No, I can't type today. Well, I'm in CSS. That's why it's not working. There it is. It's a fairly big file, 312,000 bytes, and that's all XML. It's a big, giant XML file. You can go in there and manually edit it. Call me when you get home. All right, so you get a big, giant XML file. The problem is you got to get the XML file into the program. The program can read the file. And that's the builder can load the file from a file. That makes your application a little more complicated because your application has to include files that have to be read. It's better to make the file part of your application, and you do that by creating a resource. There's a program that will take things like player.glade and icons and pictures and all sorts of other stuff, translate them into basically a C program that contains an enormous amount of pre-initialized data, which is the actual stuff, and you compile that with your actual program, and then you can load it from a resource. Okay, so what are we talking about here? We're talking about resource.xml. It's again another XML file, but it's got a pile of stuff. First one down here, a lot of these I'm going to get rid of because they came over from the other side and they're not really in use. They're not hurting anything. They are taking up space, but not that much. But I will start getting rid of them. The first one there is player.glade. And it specifies it's going to strip blanks, and so it's going to compress it because it doesn't need to be pretty. It can be compressed. So the first thing in the resource is the player.glade. What else is in there? Oh, meter.png. That gives you the background for the meters. It's an image file, .png. It's in icons. You can see the prefix information there. It's all using Linux. You have to use Linux style, not backslashes. You have to use forward slashes. So that's the meter.png, the mute PNG. So some of them are used, some of them are not. I don't want to go try to say which ones are and which ones aren't. But anyway, I'll be pruning them back, ones that are not currently in use. But that's the resource file. What do you do with the resource file? You compile it. How do you compile it? There's a script, resource.script. I put all that stuff up at the top. This is the business line right down here, glib.compile-resources. Theoretically, you should be able to run this from Ubuntu 18.04. I tried, it couldn't. I didn't want to fool with it. In someplace out there, I'd have to figure out how to install the correct software for it, and I didn't feel like it, so I just left it here in the VirtualBox, which is just as good. Okay, so basically it's a program which reads the XML file, which you can see out at the end. The XML file's out at the end, telling to generate source. I don't know what other the options are. There probably are, but the source is what I want. And the target, what it's going to generate, the name of the file it's going to generate is resource.c. So if I type resource compile.script, it's doing it. And if I look at resource.c, you can see it's one big giant table of data. How big is it? It's 116,000 lines. So it's a big program. What's on the bottom? Oh, this stuff and so forth. I don't care. I'm not getting into it. It's there's just bazillions. It'll get smaller when I prune it, but don't worry about it. It's a big giant C file. And it's got all the information in it necessary in order to load all that stuff into your program. So your program doesn't have to load it from files. And if we look at compile.bat, now this is obviously a Windows program, you can see, I went over this in the other video, you can see the setup, gets rid of the old one, CL, that's the Microsoft Windows Visual C++ compiler. 2019 edition, I think, or I hope. And there's two things. One is, first of all, the main program is actually a C++ program. I didn't want it to be a C++ program, but I'm accessing Microsoft APIs, which have C++ interface on them. So I just said, poof, you're a C++ program. Change the ending, and I had to go in and change a few things that have to be in C calling sequence. You'll see that in the next video. But anyway, player.cpp is the main program, and there's resource.c. So it gets compiled. These are libraries and so forth. I don't know what's in them, and I don't care. And then there's all the linkage. Obviously, the up arrow is a circumflex is a line continuation. Those are include files that are needed during compilation, and I went through all the other stuff before. Okay, let's look at player.cpp just briefly. And I will say, let's see if I can find it easy. There it is. There's the line. Builder, which is, what is the actual definition of builder? It's a pointer. It's a GTK builder pointer. That's the data type, GTK builder. It's a pointer. So builder, the pointer, gets a value by calling the function GTK builder new from resource. It could say new from file, too. If it said new from file, I'd be reading it from a file. New from resource, however, it's going to read it mysteriously internally, because that resource.c, or any other name you gave it, has been loaded into your program. So what it does is it gets the player.glade information. It's stored internally in your program, and it reads it in. And the nomenclature, you start off with a slash. I don't know, because you weren't using the slash on the other side. But anyway, you use the slash, and that gives returns a pointer to the digested, parsed player.glade. And the mysteries of what's going on in there, I don't know, and I don't care. All I care is that it works. So when I get the pointer to builder, it is a pointer to the structural information contained in player.glade. So that when I start using it down here, there's my Easter eggs, the first one. Easter egg, egg underscore image is a GTK widget. Almost all of these are declared GTK widgets, which is the most generic pointer. Then they get cast into GTK button, GTK this, that, and the other thing as needed. But almost everything starts off as a widget. And you see they're all being cast as widgets. I don't know if you have to cast them or not. And some of them you did, some of them you didn't. So I just cast them all. And so what it's doing here, and again, this is what's going on, is that you're passing down to that program, GTK builder get object. You're passing down the pointer to builder, which is a pointer to all the information you need to know where every object goes and what its description is, how big it is, where it gets located, and all that stuff. They all have names. Those are the IDs. Egg image is the ID. Okay, so it passes down the ID egg image, and builder says, oh, where is this? And it says, here it is. Here's the egg image. And it returns me a pointer to a data structure, which is the data structure associated with that widget on the screen. As it turns out, that widget is not on the screen. It's hidden, but that comes later. It's actually, as far as it's concerned, it's on the screen. So it gives me a pointer. Egg image is a pointer to the data structure that deals with that particular entity on the screen. And that's what all the rest of them are. But you see, we use builder in every one of these things because it's the pointer to the master table. So that's and we use this resource business in a couple of other places. I load images from resource, obviously. But that's how it works. So the next video, I'm going to try to explain how the internal mess here, the actual program works. But I thought it'd be good, first of all, to look at how the Glade file more or less hangs together. I know it's messy. It's basic. On one hand, it's simple because everything is repetitive. You get on the first screen, you've got 16 copies of basically the same thing. But since they have so many widgets associated with every one of them, you've got widgets galore. If I go down here, you just see some of these things. Here's a bunch of adjustments, and they're all named adjustment. I don't know what they are. But here's where the time and length begin. P1 time, P2 time length, P3 time length, on and on and on. And there's the buttons, and they're just repetitive. They're very repetitive because each button basically does the same as each other one. I suppose you could make a generic single button, but then you'd have to poll to figure out which button it was. So it's 6 to 1 1/2 dozen the other. This is at least straightforward, repetitive but straightforward. And there's an awful lot. See, there are all those check boxes, all these buttons, all the delete buttons. There's just piles of them, and they're modified inside the program, or the program needs access to them. So on that, we will quit until next time.